Welcome to our class on Chassidic. We're going to be learning this week a very beautiful and powerful and meaningful, deep Chassidic discourse. The name of the Chassidic discourse is called Pasach Rabbi Shimon, referring to Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, who is celebrating his yahrzeit on Lag Ba'omer. The Rebbe said this Chassidic discourse on Shabbos Parshas Emor, which was the 19th day of the month of Iyer, in the year Tafshin Lamed Dalid, 48 years ago. The Rebbe went on to certify and edit this Chassidic discourse in honor of Lag Ba'omer, the 33rd day of the Omer, in the year Tafshin Mem Tes, which is interesting. It's actually 33 years ago when the Rebbe certified and edited this Chassidic discourse. So again, the Chassidic discourse is based on a piece from the Zohar, which actually Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said this on the day of his passing. And he started off and he said, Pasach Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon opened up and he said, Ani ledoidi v'alai chukasoi, which is a verse in Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs of King Solomon, which says, I am to my beloved, and to me, my beloved has tremendous yearning for. And he went on to explain as follows, in Aramaic: every single day, this katarna by alma, when I was bound up in this world, so even though I was bound up in this physical world, but nevertheless, bechad katires katarna, but nevertheless in one type of connection that I connect to Hashem, beiba kochabrichu, or begin kach, and because of that, hashta v'alai chukasei, that's why, because even though I was bound up in this world, but nevertheless I cleave to Hashem, and that's why now Hashem is connected to me in a very, very deep way. And it continues on in that same class Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was giving, and he said, Mistakel Havino, I looked every single day on the verse in Psalms where King David says, Ba'Hashem tishalel nafshi, in Hashem does my soul praise, and he says, Va'idna, now is the verse is fulfilled completely, because my soul, Be'achida, Be'lehita, Be'istakwa, which means I'm becoming one with Hashem. In other words, his whole life of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, or his whole life when he was bound up in this world. But even though he was in the physical world, he was nevertheless mekusher, he was connected to Hashem. In other words, even though he used the term as katarna in Aramaic, but as katarna is the same expression of a kesher, of being bound up. Like, for example, the Rebbe gives the example where it says in the Torah in Genesis, when they gave birth to two children. So she said about tiksher, and she tied on one hand, and the Targum translates v'katarta. So you see that when katirna, when you're bound up, it comes from the word of kesher, a connection, a deep connection. In other words, when there's a connection, there's with two things. You tie two things together. So in the world, while he was in the world, b'chad katiris katarna, he was connected to Hashem, but it was two things that were connected. But today, the day that he's passing, he reached a higher level, a much deeper level, that he becomes literally one with Hashem. Be'achida. So in other words, Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai is saying, the Rebbe explains over here, is that when he was alive, even though he was in the world, he was connected to Hashem. But it's like two things that were connected. However, the day he passed away, he reached a level of ultimate unity. He totally became one with Hashem. So the Rebbe says something very profound and something very, very important. He says like this: even though this higher level of Be'achida, that he became one with Hashem, when did that happen? It happened on the day that he passed away, on Lag Ba'omer. But nevertheless, since his whole life, his goal was, and he toiled to reach that level, he become one with Hashem. Like he said, Mistakel Havdina b'hai cry, I would look at that verse every single day, to cleave to Hashem every day. So in other words, even though he reached it ultimately at the end of his life, but since that's where his thought was, and that's what his goal was, and that was his mission, so therefore you must say on a certain level, on a general level, he reached to it even while he was alive. Like Jerry brings in a footnote, that we all know that the place where a person's thought is, that's where you are. So if it's thought a whole life was to be one with Hashem, so even though technically he only got there at the end of his life, but you must say that he reached that level during his life as well. In other words, the completion of it was fulfilled today, the day he passed away, but he must have it on some level all throughout his life. And Rebbe says, and it's also understood based on what it's brought down in classic Chassidic discourse from the Rebbe Rashab in the year Tov Reish Samach Vav, and he says over there as follows. We know that the Rashbi, Reb Shimon bar Yochai, when he learned Torah, so there's a concept called Torah Yumnosai. His Torah was his profession. That means 24/7, that's what he did, and that's what he was preoccupied, that's what he thought about. That was his life. Torah was his life. In other words, because he learned Torah on such a powerful level, so in the world of a Kabbalah it says that when he learned Torah, he was able to draw down, in Hebrew it's called Mad. Mad stands for Mayin Duchrin, a male energy. He was able to draw down positive energy in the world by learning Torah. Not like all the other Tanoim, all the other rabbis and teachers, that they learned Torah. But the only thing they were able to do, they were able only to elevate Halas, Man, Mayin Nukvim, which is a lower level of energy. But on the other hand, the Rashbi was able to bring down the higher level of energy. Why? Because since he was on the level of Be'achida, Be'lehita, he was he was cleaving to Hashem, he was one with Hashem. And since he was Teirasa Yamnasa, he's someone that learned Torah, that was his occupation. So that was his whole life that way. So in other words, even though he got there at the end of his life, we were saying since he thought about it, he had it his whole life. And the same thing also when you see with his Torah learning, that he was able to achieve much higher levels than everyone else because he was living on a whole different spiritual level. And Rebbe says he'd like to add that in many Chassidic discourses, they bring the idea of Be'achida. And it was the goal that he wanted to reach at his end of his life, which he reached, that he was one with Hashem. They bring it in continuation with the spiritual idea B'chad Katiris Katarna. I mean, he was connected in a oneness with Hashem. And as they bring it together, why? Even though B'chad Katiris Katarna is a lower level. But nevertheless, since they bring it together, because inside, embedded within the Chad Katiris Katarna, which means he was connected to Hashem in a deep way, is not the level of Be'achida, where he became totally one. But nevertheless, since they bring it together, it's because in the Chad Katiris Katarna, in the level where he was totally connected to Hashem, and even though it's two levels that are connected, but nevertheless, inside, in Pnimius, in the internal part, you had the component of Be'achida. You had the component where he was really, really one with Hashem. But all throughout his life, the idea of Be'achida, the higher level, where he became one with Hashem, wasn't revealed. It wasn't a revealed level. But the day he passed away, that's what happens. What happens on the day he passed away? The internal part of the person gets revealed. The source of the person gets revealed. So what happens on all the work that you do your whole life, that's what gets presented the day you pass away. So then what was revealed was the internal part of his life. The internal part of B'chad Katiris Katarna, that he was connected with one with Hashem, which is not only just a connection, but it was actually on the level of what? Of Be'achida. So just to recap before we go further, what the Rebbe is saying is that Rashbi, the day he passed away, he said a teaching that even though he was bound up in this world, but nevertheless, B'chad Katiris Katana, he was always connected to Hashem. Obviously a connection which is a kesher, it's two things that are connected, but a deep connection. But the end of his life, he reached the oneness. But the beautiful idea the Rebbe says is that since that was his goal throughout his life, therefore, even though he didn't get to till the end of his life, you must say that was the essence of his service. And because that was the essence of his service, it did have a powerful effect, during his life, and that's what got revealed at the end of his life. And like Rebbe gives an example, at his Torah Yumnosai, the fact that he learned Torah, that was his occupation, and he reached a very high level of bringing down masculine energy versus the other Tanaim, is because obviously he was connected in a very, very deep way. So now the Rebbe is going to explain this idea, these deep ideas of B'chad Katiris Katana, which means the kesher, the strong bond, and the level of the oneness which Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai reached at the end of his life. So the Rebbe says we're going to explain it based on what is known, that there's two terms. Well, there's many. This conversation has two terms. There's a term of hiskashrus, when there's a connection, and which is, again, the Aramaic word is B'chad Katiris Katana, and then there's something which is called dveikus, which is cleaving. And hiskashrus, a deep connection, is much higher than cleaving. Why is that? So again, hiskashrus is totally unified, and dveikus is cleaving. But hiskashrus is much deeper. Why is that? And the Rebbe says like this. When you use the term dveikus, which is cleaving, that's an external connection. And like the Rebbe gives the example, the prophet says, "Kasha yidbak ha'ezer al masnaish," when the garment is connected to the loin of the person, so it's the garment, the loin, two different things, and one is connected to the other. In other words, that when you connect the garment, it doesn't become part of the person. It's an external connection. So his dibuk, cleaving is two things, and they cleave to each other. One is external, one is internal. On the other hand, when it comes to his skashrus, where it's totally bonded, that's an internal connection. In Hebrew, it's called bepnimius. It's an internal connection. Like the example the Rebbe brings is where it says in the Torah, where Yehuda, when he took responsibility for Binyamin, what did he say? B'nafshay kshura b'nafshay. That my soul is bound up in his soul. And we see that literally he totally gave up his line. He said, as the expression in the Torah says, if not, how can I go back? In other words, he was totally, it was a real connection, it was a previous connection, it was an internal connection. And that was a real deep connection. So in other words, you see there's a major difference between his skashrus, which that's the connection Shimon Chai was living a whole life, versus dveikus, which is an external connection. And Rebbe says this difference between cleaving, which is external, and iskashrus, which is internal, that's the difference between karbonos, sacrifices that were brought in the temple, and k'toyres, the incense that was brought in the temple. What's the difference? Because why do the Jewish people bring sacrifices? Why do you go ahead and take an animal that belongs to you, that you can use, you can have a nice big barbecue, but instead you give it as a gift to Hashem? The reason why you bring it, because you're davuk, you're cleaving to Hashem. There's us, there's Hashem, we cleave to Hashem, we're willing to bring a sacrifice. And like it says in the Medrash and the Zohar, and because a sacrifice, we're cleaving to Hashem, but it's an external connection, and that's why we bring sacrifices. That's why the sacrifices were brought. We know in the temple there was two altars: the external altar and the internal altar. Where was sacrifices brought? On the external altar, because a sacrifice is coming from an external connection with Hashem, and therefore it's brought on the external altar. External altar. In other words, what does that mean practically in our spiritual life? And practically referring to the external part of our heart. So in other words, like this: dveikus is an external connection. Dveikus is a source where you bring sacrifices, and dveikus also represents only giving our external heart. On the other hand, k'toyres, incense. As we learned before, that k'toyres, k'tiras, katarna is the same. It's a translation from Aramaic. It's translated as kesher, a bond. And anytime you have the term kesher, it's translated in the Targum. Translated is keter with a tes. So b'chad k'tiras katarna is referring to kesher. Kesher is b'chad k'tiras katarna. So therefore, since the k'toyres in the temple was connected more to the not dveikus external, but it's an internal connection. So therefore, the k'toyres is brought on which altar? It's brought on the internal altar. And what does that mean practically on a spiritual level? Kesser is connected to when we serve Hashem with pnimius halev, the internal part of our heart. Now, so you're going to say, what's the difference if you serve Hashem with your external heart, your internal heart? I'm serving Hashem, I'm cleaving to Hashem. The difference, Rebbe says, is very simple. The difference between serving Hashem with the external part of our heart and serving Hashem with the internal part of our heart, when a person serves Hashem with the external part of our heart, so the only thing you're going to do for that relationship is things which are, I'll say it in Hebrew, I'll translate, tam vadas, things which are logical and things that make sense. In other words, when you love somebody or something based on logic, so what happens is, it's susceptible to change. Because if you love someone or something based on logic, if the logic changes, the love changes. So chitzonius halev is not guaranteed. It's not consistent. It depends what's feeding it. If what's feeding it is keeping on going, so the love will continue. But if what's feeding it goes away, the love is going to go away. On the other hand, the service of Hashem from the internal heart, that's beyond logic. And because it's beyond logic, love that's coming from the internal heart never goes away. It's impossible. It's not, why should it go away? If it's logical love, the logic changes, the love changes. But if the love is from an internal place, the love doesn't go away. And therefore it's consistent. and it's steady, and it's strong. And that's why the sacrifices, in Hebrew, is called a korban. If you take the root letters of a korban, it's come from karoiv, from closeness. And k'toris, on the other hand, what's k'toris mean? We said already, k'toris is kashrus. It's a deep connection. In other words, when the closeness means, what does korban mean? It's a closeness. What does the closeness mean? That you're a somebody, and you're close to someone else. You're a somebody, and I'm close to Hashem. But if you're somebody that you're close, you can become far also. If you're somebody that's close, you can become far away. On the other hand, is kashrus, which is k'toires. That's a real bond. In Hebrew, it's called a kesher shel kayama. It's a bond that's everlasting. And a bond that's everlasting, it's one that doesn't change. So in other words, to recap, what we're learning over here is that there's two different types. There's cleaving, which it's an external connection, which is connected to the sacrifices, the external temple, the external part of our heart. And then there's the kesher, which is a internal connection, which is connected to the k'toires, which is connected to the inner altar, which is connected to the inner part of our heart. And the practical difference is that an external relationship changes, and an internal, deep relationship never changes through the highs and lows of life. Now, so till now, the Rebbe says we learned the difference between dveikus, cleaving, and iskashrus, a deep connection, in the spiritual service of Hashem, milmata l'mayla, which means from below and high, from the external part of our heart, from the internal part of our heart, from the bringing the sacrifice from the k'toros. In other words, when we're referring to these sacrifices and the incense, they're both serving Hashem, which is basically elevating the animal on high, elevating the incense on high. Now we're going to learn about the difference between dveikus and iskashrus, cleaving and a deep connection, and the way it's drawn down, not milmata l'mayla, the way it comes down milmayla, from on high down below. What are the two examples of that? So we know when you learn Torah, you bring in godly light into this world, and when you do mitzvot, you bring down godly energy into this world. Like the Zohar says as follows: how beloved are the Jewish people in front of Hashem. And we want to, I'll quote the Zohar, we want to cleave to Hashem, so the Zohar says, look how beloved the Jewish people are with Hashem. There's two things we want to do. We want to have dibuk, we want to cleave to Hashem, which we already learned before is the external connection, and we want to have a kesher, we want to have a deep internal connection with Hashem. That's what the Zohar says. So the Rebbe brings from the Mittler Rebbe, the second Chabad Rebbe, and he explains, what does it mean we want to cleave to Hashem? How do we cleave to Hashem? Listakbahu. That happens through mitzvahs. Anytime you do a mitzvah, whether it's tefillin, kasher, Shabbos, you're cleaving to Hashem. Now, why is it called cleaving? Because when you draw down godly energy, when you do a mitzvah, mitzvahs are generally called makif. They hover over you. There's you, and you're doing a mitzvah. And you put on the tefillin, you keep kosher Shabbos, it hovers over you. It's makif. Like, for example, like the verse says, "V'yamini, my right hand techapkeni," it hugs me. In other words, the light that comes down when you do a mitzvah literally hugs the person that's doing the mitzvah. And when you hug someone, it's not internal, it's external. And that's why he says, at least stakbahu, you want to cleave to Hashem. And the cleaving is an external connection. So milmayla lamata, dibuk, an external connection is by doing mitzvahs. What does it mean, to have a deep internal connection? That happens through learning Torah. Why? Because when a person learns Torah, now you're drawing down the godly energy that Pnimi is inside you. Like the verse says clearly, he goes into my insides. When you learn Torah, you comprehend Torah, it literally becomes part of you. It's an internal connection. And that's why he says, it creates a kesher, creates a deep connection with us. Because his kashrus, a connection, is an internal connection. In other words, the connection of Hashem with the Jewish people, that we create that connection through learning Torah, that's called the kashrus. Like we know the famous line that says, Tlas Kishrin Inon Miskashrin Darbada. There are three connections that are connected one with the other. What are the connections? Since we know Torah is a connection, what are the three? Hashem, the Torah and the Jewish people. So when it comes milmaila lamata, so mitzvahs draws it down b'chitzonius, and Torah draws it down b'pnimius. So that's the difference between his dibuk, to cleave, which is through mitzvahs and through kabbalas, like in the first case, and the second thing, it's through Torahs and through learning Torah. Now, and as I explained, that Torah creates a kesher, a deep internal connection. Now we're going to go further and deeper into it. So Rebbe says like this: the cleaving of the Jewish people with Hashem, in other words, because we cleave to Hashem, and it's a very powerful point I was saying, is because we cleave to Hashem, that's when we have the power to bring a carbon. How can we bring a carbon? Because we're cleaving to Hashem. We want to cleave to Hashem. So because we cleave to Hashem, we have the power to bring a sacrifice to Hashem. So there's two components in this cleaving to Hashem that causes us to bring a sacrifice. So the Rebbe brings in the Medrash. The Medrash says that that Hashem commanded the Jewish people to bring sacrifices. Why did Hashem tell us to bring a sacrifice? Because we cleave to Hashem. And like he brings the verse that we already quoted from before from the prophets, that when the covering is cleaving to the loin, so in other words, it's an external connection, but that creates the connection. So because we are who we are, we want to cleave to Hashem, so therefore we have the ability to bring sacrifice, and that creates that solidifies the connection. That's what it says in the Medrash. The source for the reason for the sacrifices is because we want to cleave to Hashem based on the verse. The Zohar says in Kabbalah as follows: that the Jewish people are meritorious. Because why are we meritorious? Because Hashem called us Adam. Hashem called us Adam. Where did Hashem call us Adam? Because in the Torah, in reference to the sacrifice, what does the Torah say? Adam ki yakriv mekem. A man amongst you that will bring a sacrifice. So the question is, as Ari says, why does the Torah call us Adam? Because it says, "V'atem hadveikim b'Hashem Elokeichem." Those that cleave to Hashem. So in other words, when we cleave to Hashem, we're called an Adam. So recap. So what the Medrash is saying is that by bringing a sacrifice, because we cleave to Hashem, that's why we bring a sacrifice. Medrash says even deeper. Hashem calls us an Adam because we're cleaving to Hashem. So the Rebbe brings from the Rebbe Rashab in Hemshach Samach Vav, and he says as follows: the Medrash is referring to the cleaving of vessels. In other words, a vessel is chitzonius. If you have a vessel and you have something in the vessel, the vessel is chitzonius, the external part. And because it's an external part, so when a vessel has something inside, the connection is not a oneness connection. There's the vessel and whatever's inside. And whatever's inside can go out from what's inside. So the vessel creates an external connection what's inside. So therefore he brings the verse. Therefore the Medrash brings the verse that when the covering is connected to the loin, in other words, the covering is its own identity, and the person is its own identity. So the Medrash looks at the relationship of sacrifice as an external connection, and therefore it uses the verse which refers to an external connection, and that's what sacrifices are. However, the Zohar goes a step deeper and it says like this: yeah, it is dveikos. It is two things that are connected, but it's the connection of the light. In other words, when the light cleaves, it becomes a much deeper, it becomes a oneness type of connection. By a vessel that cleaves, the vessel's the vessel, the light is the light. But when the light cleaves, it becomes one. And that's why the Zohar uses which verse? V'atem hadveikim b'Hashem. Yeah, true, we're cleaving, but we're cleaving by Havaya L'keich Hashem. We're literally connected. Why? Because we're referring to not the connection of the vessel, we're referring to the connection of the light. Now, so if that's the case, Rebbe says, 1 second. What are we saying? Dveikos is cleaving. The Medrash is referring to cleaving and external cleaving. The Zohar is saying a step further. It's not the vessel that's cleaving; it's the light that's cleaving. So and it becomes like one. So the Rebbe said, if that's the case, why is it called veikos? If it becomes one, the veikos is two things that are cleaving. If it becomes one, why is it called veikos? And why is it called cleaving? And Rebbe explains like this: since we learned veikos is external, because even though it's the light where it becomes one, but the fact is, where does light come from? Light is not the essence. The more, the source of light is the essence. So light is an expansion and a revelation which comes outside of the essence. Light is ultimately not the essence yet. So since it's not the essence yet, that's why it's cleaving. So it's a deeper cleaving, but it's still not the cleaving with the essence itself. It's still an external connection. So in other words, what we learned so far is that when it comes to dveikos, the cleaving, there's two different levels. Like the Medrash sees it's two things that are connected. The Zohar sees it's even deeper, but it's still an external connection. Now, the Rebbe says, based on what it's known, that Torah in mitzvahs is compared to light and the vessels. In other words, Torah is the light, as we know, and mitzvahs are the vessels. So based on this, the Rebbe says as follows, that even the connection that we have through learning Torah, so the way Torah is an expansion and a revelation is also on the level of Dveikos. Because before we learned that what's Torah, Torah is one, it's previous. But since we just learned that when it comes to according to the Zohar, the way they're explaining Dveikos, and Dveikos is referring to light, and since light is connected to Torah, so the Rebbe says there's two levels in Torah. One is where Torah is the expansion part, the revelation of Torah. That's cleaving. And then there's a deeper part of Torah where it's called these skashrus, like we learned already before, where it becomes one by learning Torah, where we connect to Hashem through Torah, the Jewish people, and through Torah connect to Hashem. That's referring to not the external part of the Torah, it's referring to the essence part of Torah, which is higher than the expansion and the revelation. In other words, before we go further, let's recap what they were saying here. It's like this. What we learned before was that mitzvah is chitzonius, which brings down external, and Torah is pnimius. What did we just learn? That the Eir, light, is dveikos, it's chitzonius, but it's very, very deep. So the Rebbe said there's two levels in learning Torah. There's the external part of Torah, and that's connected to the light like dveikos, and then there's the internal part of Torah, which is totally one, like a real kesha. And now I was going to explain the difference, and he said like this. It's known that when we're talking about these skashros, the real deep connection of the Jewish people and Torah and Hashem, there's two ways to look at that connection. One is the way Torah comes down in the level of ishtalshlos, the way it flows down through the worlds, through the spheres, etc. Now, so on one hand, Torah goes through the Seder Ishtalshlos, means it goes through the worlds, it goes through all the spheres. Now, the way things flow in Seder HaYishtalshlos, the way things flow from one world to the next world, from one sphere to the next sphere, what happens is, so let's take, for example, the world of Atzilus as an example. So you have the world of Atzilus, you have the internal part of the world of Atzilus, and you have the external part of the world of Atzilus. So in the world of Atzilus, you want to be in the internal part. But let's go down now to the world of Bria. The world of Bria doesn't get its energy from the internal part of Atzilus, it's too powerful. It gets it from the external part of Atzilus. So what's external in Atzilus is actually internal for Bria. In other words, anytime you go down from one level to the next, what's on the higher level, chitzonius, and the lower level becomes pnimius. So therefore, the connection that we have with the Torah is that the internal part of us, when we learn Torah, what do we connect to? Torah is higher than us on a certain level in the shtalshla. So therefore, we connect to the external part of the Torah. And the same thing also when Torah connects to Hashem, that the internal part of Torah connects to the external part of Hashem. Since there are three chains: Hashem, Torah, us. So when we connect to the internal part of Torah, it's really chitzonius. When the Torah is connecting, it's the chitzonius of Hashem. Now, in that type of flow, we're going down Seder Hishtalshalos. So the connection, Hiskashrus, the connection that we have with the hidden part of Hashem, doesn't go straight from Hashem. It goes through the external part of Torah, the internal part of Torah goes to the external part of Hashem. In other words, and it goes from one level to the next, and ultimately you get to Hashem. So it's much further away. So therefore, the way Torah goes down and say the Ishtalshlos, when we're connecting to Torah, we're connecting to only connecting to the external part of the Torah. That's from the external part of the Torah. But on the other hand, when you're dealing with the essence of the Torah, where Torah is beyond levels of Atzilus, Bri, Yetzirah, Spiros, etc. So on that level, the connection that we have with Hashem, in other words, so what happens then is, since we're connecting to the essence, even the revealed part of us, we're connecting directly with the essence of Hashem. And it means even when we're learning the revealed part of Torah, and we understand it with our comprehension, with our intellect, we're connecting even the revealed part of our soul. Even with we're comprehending it, Chachma, Bina, etc., we're connecting with the essence of Hashem. And we're connecting with the essence of the Torah and through it the essence of Hashem. In other words, to recap before we go further and take it to the next level, what the Rebbe is saying is like this. There's two levels of Torah. There's one level of Torah goes down logical, methodical. So then we connect to our internal self, connects to the external part of the Torah. The internal part connects to Hashem. So we're very far distant away from the essence of Hashem. On the other hand, there's the essence of Hashem, which is in the essence of the Torah, which is in the essence of us. And we have the power to go straight up, straight to the essence of the Torah, straight to the essence of Hashem. So based on this, Rebbe explains beautifully, and he says like this. The connection that we have with the Torah, from the level the way Torah comes down from one world to the next world through Ishtalshalos, that's included in the Devekos, in the cleaving, which is external. Because we can't get internal. Because our connection that we have with Torah on this level is only in the external part of the Torah. And not only that, but even the internal part is coming like through an intermediary. So we can never get so deep. So how do we connect on this level? It's called Dveikos. We're cleaving. There's us, there's Hashem, there's a Torah, and there's an external connection. We try to get deep and deep, but it's always going to be an external connection. But on the other hand, when we say that there's three rings and there's three connections that connect one with the other, what are we referring to then there? That's when we're referring to the essence of Torah, which is higher than Ishtalshalos. And this connection goes, literally, we connect to the essence and the concealed part of the Torah, and we connect to the concealed part of Hashem in not only an external way, really in an internal way. So you see that learning Torah depends. We can connect like with Davuk to the Torah. That's our external self with even our internal self with the external Torah. And that's called Veikos, with Davuk to Hashem. On the other hand, we can have a Kesher Nafshi with Hashem and the Torah. And that's going to be real, that's going to be premius. Now we're going to take it a step further. So we already have two levels in learning Torah. One is through Dveikos, external connection, and then we have the premius, the internal connection. It never says like this. Even in the higher level, in the deeper level, where we connect the premius in an eternal way to the Torah and to Hashem, even in the level where we're connecting to the essence of Torah, where the Jewish people and Torah, and then Torah to Hashem, but nevertheless, we're still an independent entity. The Torah is an independent entity, and Hashem technically is independent the way we're talking. Now, there is a deeper level that Yisrael, the Jewish people, are rights to the Torah, and Hashem is kul echad, it's one. So far we learned Dveikos, Hiskashrus Primi, and then where it's one. And this is even higher of the connection of Yisrael, of the Jewish people, Torah and Hashem, the way you're connecting to the essence of Torah, which is above Ishtalshalos. So again, just to recap, as we're going to go now to the third level. The first level is our internal self is connecting to external Torah, and the internal Torah is connecting to external Hashem, etc. And there it's called Dveikos. Then there's where we connect the essence of ourselves with the essence of Hashem. That's called Iskashrus. But we're still an independent entity. Now we're going to explore a whole new level. That Torah and Hashem, it's one. Literally one. Not we're connecting and connecting. There's no connection, we're one. What does that mean? And Rebbe says we're going to understand this third level, a deeper level, based on pointing out, going into reading the term very, very clearly. He says like this. What does it say? Tlas Kishrin. There are three connections that are connected one with the other. There are three connections, one with the other. So rest 1 second. There's the Jewish people connected to the Torah and connected to Hashem. So how many connections are there? There are three things. There's us, the Torah, and Hashem. There's one connection to Torah, one connection to Hashem. So there's only two connections. So if there's only two connections, why are we saying three connections? So one of the explanations is very, very simple. Because the fact is, there's one connection from us to the Torah, one from the Torah to Hashem. So where's the third? And the third one is where we connect directly to Hashem. We have a direct connection with Hashem. And the connection is not through the middleman of Torah. How can we connect directly to Hashem? Don't we have to have Torah? And the answer is no. Because the source, our source, is in the essence of Hashem, which is higher than the source of Torah. So yes, on the third level, we're one with Hashem. But what does that mean? Because even though there's a connection that we have through Torah, we have a direct connect to Hashem. And the way it works in the chain is very, very simple. Like you have like a ring. There's no beginning, there's no end. Notice what happens is very, very simple. In the beginning, we connect to the Torah, and the Torah connects to Hashem, but afterwards we connect directly to Hashem. So it starts with, we learn Torah, through Torah we connect to Hashem, and then we connect directly to Hashem. In other words, after we connect to the Torah, and then we connect to Hashem, what happens then is, as we learn Torah, what gets revealed is that the source, our source, is actually higher than the source of Torah. The connection of the Jewish people with Hashem is direct. And that's what happens like this. Before you learn Torah, so you think, I'm learning, there's Torah and there's Hashem. Once you learn Torah, so yes, you connect to Torah and then you connect to Hashem, but then you realize, guess what? You know what I learned? I have my own relation with Hashem, which is deeper and without the Torah. So after I create the connection, in other words, between me and Hashem, now so at the beginning, what happens is I connect to our Torah, and then I connect to Hashem, and then I have a connection directly with Hashem. But after I find out that my connection is with the essence of Hashem, then what happens is I actually bring that powerful connection into the Torah as well. Like the verse says, King David would connect Torah with Hashem. So in other words, what the Rebbe is saying is like this. We connect to our Torah to Hashem. Then we realize that we're connected to Hashem. But then we don't keep it as selfish. Then we take that deep connection that we have with Hashem and bring it into the Torah. Why is that? Never saying like this. Because besides the fact, what is Torah? Torah is Chachmasei Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In the spheres, Torah is connected to the sphere of Chachma. Now, Chachma compared to the essence of the infinite light of Hashem, you can't compare. So Torah's base connection with Hashem is through Chachma. Our connection is with the essence of the infinite light of Hashem. Now, since the source of Torah and the Jewish people, the way they are in the essence of Hashem, so whose source is higher? Our source is much higher. Our source is much higher than the Torah source. So what happens then is, when we learn Torah, we bring into the Torah the essence of Hashem into the Torah as well. So based on this, Rebbe says something called beautiful, and he says as follows. This that we say, that the Jewish people and Torah and Hashem are all one, not Dveikas for sure not. That was the first level. Not only that it's hiskashrus, we're connected in the deepest level. No, we're one with Hashem. So in reference to Torah, what was the whole reason why Hashem wrote the Torah and gave us the Torah? Look at the Torah, it says clearly, the Torah was for the Jewish people. What does it say in the Torah? Daber b'nei Yisrael, speak to the Jewish people. So obviously the Jewish people came first. Tzavos would command the Jewish people. So there's the Torah is actually there for us. And in other words, it's something that connects us with Hashem. But the fact is, we have our own deep connection with the essence of Hashem. And our deep connection with the essence of Hashem, it's not dependent on something else. We're one with Hashem. So in other words, like this. Torah's source is Chachma. Our source is the Yasam Hashem. Number two is, without the Jewish people, why would Hashem have a Torah? So the Torah is for the Jewish people. Like it says, Tzavos b'nei Yisrael, Daber el b'nei Yisrael. However, we're not for something else. We are created because Hashem created us. The Torah was created for us. But when we go ahead, that we're sourced in Hashem, and we weren't created for anything else, and we bring that powerful essence of Hashem into the Torah, so then what happens, we actually elevate the Torah to the Atzmos himself. And that's why it says Yisrael, the Jewish people, Ayrais of the Torah, and Hashem is Kul Echad. It's literally one. Us, the Torah, and Hashem is one. Why? Because we are connected to the essence of Hashem. The Torah, once we learn it, becomes one with the essence of Hashem. So based on this, Rebbe explains so beautifully as follows. The two components, what did the Rashbi say? Bechad katiris katarno. That I connected, had a deep kesher with Hashem. That's one level. Ubei achida, and it became totally one, is corresponding to the two levels of learning Torah of the Rashbi, which we know the main idea of what was the Rashbi all about? The Torah Seim was all about learning Torah. So these two components of the kesher, the connection, and the oneness are the two ways of learning Torah Rashbi. And Rebbe is going to explain it based on what it's known, that even when you're learning the revealed part of the Torah, so even when you're learning the revealed part of the Torah, what happens is you create a deep connection, a kesher, beyond dveikos. You create a real connection with what? With the atzmos, the essence of Hashem, and the essence of Torah. But what happens when you're learning the revealed part of Torah, that connection is concealed. Because you're learning whatever you're learning. So even though you're connected, but the deep connection is concealed. Where do you reveal the essential connection that we have with the Torah and Hashem? That's when you learn Chassidus. That's when you learn Pnimis of Torah. Now, what did the Rashbi learn? The Rashbi learned Nigla and Chassidus and Pnimis of Torah. But nevertheless, when the Rashbi learned Nigla, when he heard the revealed part of the Torah, what was shining there? The Pnimis Torah was shining on there. It wasn't two different Torahs. When he learned Nigla, when he heard the revealed part there, in the revealed part there, the internal part that was revealed. So therefore, the connection that he had with the essence of Hashem and the essence of Torah, even when he learned the revealed part of Torah, that was revealed. The essential connection was revealed not only when he learned Pnimis Torah, but even when he learned the revealed part of the Torah. And that's why he said, all the days of my life that I was bound up in this world, nevertheless, even though I was bound up in this world, I created a oneness connection with Hashem. What does that mean when I was bound up in this world? Even when he was learning the revealed part of the Torah. And that's the main thing that he learned, was the revealed part of the Torah. And the same thing also in everything else that he was busy with learning, because we know that he was Torah Seim Nasi, everything that he was learning. When he learned it, it was in a way that his connection was higher than Dveikos. Bechad Katiris Katarna. In other words, what we learned before, there's three levels. There's Dveikos, cleaving, there's a kasher, and then there's oneness. So what the Rashbi is saying, that Dveikos never existed in his life. It was always on tier 2. It was always with the connection. It was always with Katiris Katarna. But not only that, he actually eventually reached the third level. And it was the level with the Jewish people and Hashem, from the essence of our soul, the way it's connected to the essence of Hashem. And that's what he means when he said, Bechad Katiris Katarna. And he used the term Bechad. Katiris Katarna means a kasher, it's a bond. And he used the term Chad. And the connection was from Chad. What does Chad represent? Yechida. We know from there's 5 levels of the soul. There's Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. The highest levels, Yechida, were totally one. So they're saying Bechad, the Yechida, the connection wasn't an external connection. It was from the level of Yechida, the essence of the soul, which is higher than 2 strands, Nigla, Chassidus, different levels, literally in the oneness. And like Rebbe said, explained elsewhere, that the level of Yechida, that both of them are one, Chad Katira. So even the deep connection of Iskashus is in the level of Chad. That with the connection of the Jewish people on Hashem through Torah, since the Torah is like, so to speak, that creates the bond between us and Hashem, and it's not to ultimately one with Hashem. So therefore, the connection of the Jewish people with Hashem, when it happens through Torah, even though you're learning the Torah and you're learning from the deepest level, that's almost like connecting through two things. So it's like almost like you're learning, and you want to have a relationship with Hashem. So there's a subject matter of the will. You want to have a relationship with Hashem. So what happens then? It's two. Once there's you and Hashem, and you want, then there's two. But the ultimate is, the true level is bechad katiris katan, not to me and Hashem creating connection. One connection. And that connection is a connection between the Jewish people and Hashem, which is higher than the connection through Torah. Because if it's through Torah, now it's already, there's two strands. There's me, there's Hashem, there's the Torah. But the ultimate goal is bechad katiris katana, that the connection was with Hashem is higher. It comes directly from Atzmos, from the essence of Hashem itself. So based on this, Rebbe explains, the Rashbi reached a level, the highest level, the day he passed away. He called it Beyachida. The day he passed away specifically. Why? Because throughout his life, what was he doing? He was learning Torah. Like we said, Torah Seim Nosei. So even the level Bechad Katiris Katarno means he was bound up with a deep connection, and it was one, the essence of his soul. But nevertheless, even though it was almost like one, but you felt the connection. Almost like two things that are connected. But the day he passed away, what God was shining in a revealed way, and in a complete way, the connection of the Jewish people, Hashem, from the essence of our soul, Nishmasa Beyachida. So again, even though his whole life, yes, it was a connection, and it was a deep connection, and it was a one connection, but it was still, there was an existence of something. There was existence of a will. However, after 120, he reached a level where he was 100 connected to Hashem without any reason, no will, no something, no intermediaries. Now, to go further, let's guess. Even though this that the Rashbi said, Bechad Katiris Katarno, that I with oneness, Yechida, oneness, I had that deep connection, and even deeper, when he said after is the Beyachida, it's literally became one. It's a very high level. It's a high level that you don't exist. We're one with Hashem, or we're totally connected with Hashem. It's not even cleaving. We're totally connecting. But so it's a very high level. So like, why are we learning this stuff? You think we can never reach it? There was something very powerful, and he says as follows. What did we start with the Chassidic discourse? Pasach Rab Shimon. What is Pasach Rab Shimon? Rab Shimon opened up, and he said, Bechad Katiris Katarna. With one, the essence of my soul, I was unified and I got connected. What does it mean, Pasach? He opened up. The Rebbe says very simple. Pasach as a tziner. He opened up new channels. He opened up new avenues. He opened up new opportunities. So by Shimon opening up these new opportunities, he gave the power for every single one of the Jewish people, every single one of us, that we can have some level, that our learning Torah, when we learn Torah, should be on the level of that nafshay kshura la Torah b'chol pniyosai, that our soul is going to be cleaving to Torah with our whole essence. So Rav Shimon said, Pascha Shimon, he opened up the gates. Anyone that sits down to learn Torah, we can connect to Hashem with our whole internal essence. Now, you're going to say, 1 second, I can't sit and learn a whole day. There's certain times I have to stop. I have to do other things. I have other responsibilities. Rebbe says, nevertheless, when you're learning could be your whole essence. And literally you become one with the Torah. And now you come one with the Torah, you come one with the giver of the Torah, you come with Hashem. We have the power from Rishon when we're learning. There's no cell phones, there's no texting, there's no emails, there's no distractions, there's nothing. You don't hear anything. What you're hearing is that you're connecting to the Torah and you're connecting to Hashem that's giving you the Torah. One with Hashem. And you could do it, because I'm sure already opened up a new channel. We have the power to do it. And the power that's given to us is given to us in a greater way when you learn Pnimius HaTorah, when you learn Kabbalah, when you learn Chassidus, and specifically the Torah of Rashbi, because when you do that, we have the power even more to have the kesher, to have that deep connection, and to become one with the Torah and the giver of the Torah Hashem. And by learning Torah and spreading the Torah of Rashbi, and our generation ever said, thank God we had the gift that was revealed to us was Torah Chassidus, what we're learning right now, Chassidus. What we do is, not only do we connect, but by learning Torah and spreading Chassidus, we're actually bringing the Geula, we're bringing the redemption, we're bringing freedom and redemption for every one of us much quicker. And like the promise, Rebbe says, of the King Messiah to the Baal Shem Tov, that when the well springs of Chassidus, of mysticism is going to be spread out all over the world, just like we're doing right now. We're teaching Torah all over the world on YouTube. What will happen then is Asi Mar da Malka Mashiach. Mashiach will come and reveal himself. And like it says in the Zohar clearly, the Bahai Chibur Dalach, with your teaching of the Rashbi, that's how we are going to go out of Gullus with Rachamim, with compassion from Hashem. So as you can tell, it's a very, very beautiful, deep, powerful Chassidic discourse from the Rashbi. It's really, really an inspiration for anybody that wants to engage in learning Torah, that we have the power to really, really connect to Hashem on the deepest levels. We're one with Hashem, and we can do it, like the Rebbe says. Pasuk of Shimon, we have the power to learn Torah, to connect to the deepest levels of Torah, and let's hope and pray, like the Rebbe finished off and says, by learning Torah Chassidus and by spreading Chassidus, we will all merit to the Geula, the redemption, and God willing, our next class will be in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. Have a great and blessed week. Shavua Tov.